Sarah Mitchell wiped the sweat from her forehead as she checked her watch. 3 in the morning, and she was still at the military hospital making her rounds through the intensive care unit. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the sterile white corridors. She had been working for 18 hours straight, but sleep was the last thing on her mind. In room 314 lay Sergeant James Rodriguez, a Marine who had arrived 3 days ago with severe injuries from an explosion in Afghanistan. His condition was critical, and Sarah had volunteered to take the night shift to monitor him personally. The other nurses thought she was crazy, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this young soldier needed her constant attention. James was only 22 years old, the same age as her younger brother, who had died in a car accident 5 years earlier. Maybe that was why she felt so connected to his case. His dark hair was matted with dried blood and his face was swollen beyond recognition. Multiple tubes and wires connected him to various machines that beeped and hummed throughout the night. Sarah pulled up a chair next to his bed and began checking his vital signs. His pulse was weak but steady and his breathing was labored. The doctors had said his chances were slim, but Sarah refused to give up on him. She had seen too many young people die, and she was determined to do everything in her power to save this one. As the night wore on, James's condition began to deteriorate. His blood pressure dropped dangerously low and his oxygen levels started to plummet. Sarah immediately called for the emergency team, but they were dealing with another critical patient in the trauma unit. She realized she would have to handle this alone. Working quickly, Sarah adjusted his medications and increased his oxygen flow. She performed CPR when his heart briefly stopped, pumping his chest with all her strength while tears streamed down her face. For 40 minutes, she fought to keep him alive, using every skill she had learned in her 10 years as a military nurse. The emergency team finally arrived to find Sarah still working on James, her scrubs soaked with sweat and her hands shaking from exhaustion. They took over his care and Sarah stepped back, watching anxiously as they stabilized his condition. The doctor in charge looked at her with amazement and told her that her quick actions had saved James's life. But Sarah's work was far from over. Over the next several days, she barely left James's bedside. She monitored his every breath, adjusted his medications, and spoke to him constantly, believing that somewhere deep inside his unconscious mind, he could hear her voice. She told him about her hometown, her family, and her dreams of opening a small clinic after her military service ended. Other nurses began to worry about Sarah's health. She was working double shifts, surviving on coffee and determination alone. Her supervisor, Lieutenant Colonel Mary Thompson, tried to force her to take time off, but Sarah insisted that James needed her. She had become emotionally invested in his recovery in a way that went beyond professional duty. On the 5th day, James's condition took another turn for the worse. His fever spiked to dangerous levels and infection began spreading through his body. The doctors discussed the possibility of amputation to save his life, but Sarah begged them to give her more time. She researched experimental treatments and consulted with specialists around the world via video calls. Working around the clock, Sarah implemented a new treatment protocol that combined traditional medicine with innovative techniques she had read about in medical journals. She carefully monitored his response to each medication, adjusting dosages every few hours based on his body's reactions. Her dedication was extraordinary, but it was taking a severe toll on her own health. By the 7th day, Sarah had lost 15 pounds and developed dark circles under her eyes. Her hands trembled from exhaustion, and she had trouble focusing on simple tasks, but James was showing signs of improvement. His fever had broken, and his vital signs were slowly stabilizing. The other medical staff watched in awe as Sarah continued her relentless care. She had turned James's room into a command center, with charts and medical equipment arranged precisely according to her system. She knew every detail of his condition and could predict changes in his health hours before they became apparent to others. Sarah's commitment extended beyond medical care. She contacted James's family in Texas, providing daily updates on his condition and offering comfort during their darkest hours. She learned about his childhood, his dreams of becoming a teacher after his military service, and his love for his younger sister. This personal connection only strengthened her determination to save him. As the 2nd week began, James started showing more positive signs. His wounds were beginning to heal, and his body was fighting off the infection. Sarah had successfully managed to avoid the amputation that doctors had deemed necessary. Her unconventional treatment methods were working, but the constant stress and lack of sleep were pushing her body to its limits. On the 10th day, something remarkable happened. James's eyes fluttered open for the first time since his arrival. Sarah was checking his IV when she noticed the movement. She leaned over him speaking softly and saw recognition in his eyes. He was conscious and he was going to survive. The moment was overwhelming for Sarah. All the sleepless nights, the constant worry, and the emotional investment had led to this incredible breakthrough. James was alive, conscious, and on the path to recovery. But as the relief washed over her, Sarah felt her own body beginning to fail. Her vision became blurry and her legs started to give way. She had pushed herself far beyond human limits, surviving on nothing but determination and love for a patient she barely knew. As James tried to speak, Sarah felt herself falling, her body finally succumbing to the exhaustion that had been building for weeks. The last thing Sarah remembered was James's weak voice calling for help, and the sound of medical staff rushing into the room. She had saved him, but in doing so, she had sacrificed her own health and well-being in ways she never could have imagined. The medical team rushed to Sarah's aid as she collapsed beside James's bed. Dr. Harrison, the head of the trauma unit, immediately checked her pulse and blood pressure while other nurses cleared space around her. Her body was completely limp, and her breathing was shallow and irregular. The irony was not lost on anyone that the nurse who had just saved a patient's life now needed saving herself. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson arrived within minutes. Having heard the emergency call over the hospital radio, she knelt beside Sarah's unconscious form, her face filled with concern and guilt. She had tried to force Sarah to rest multiple times over the past 2 weeks, but had ultimately allowed her dedication to continue unchecked. Now she was paying the price for that decision. They moved Sarah to the emergency room, where a full medical team began working to stabilize her condition. Blood tests revealed severe dehydration, malnutrition, and dangerously low blood sugar levels. Her body had been running on empty for days, sustained only by her fierce determination to save James. The doctors were amazed that she had functioned as long as she had under such extreme physical stress. As word of Sarah's collapse spread throughout the hospital, staff members began gathering outside the emergency room. Nurses, doctors, technicians, and orderlies all waited anxiously for news about her condition. Sarah was beloved by everyone who worked with her, known for her compassion, skill, and unwavering dedication to her patients. Her collapse had shaken the entire medical facility. Meanwhile, James Rodriguez lay in his bed, more alert than he had been since his arrival. Despite his own critical condition, he was asking every nurse who entered his room about Sarah's status. Through broken whispers, he tried to explain how he remembered her voice during his darkest hours, how she had talked to him constantly, and how he had fought to stay alive partly because he didn't want to disappoint her. Dr. Harrison worked on Sarah for 3 hours, administering IV fluids, nutrients, and medications to restore her body's balance. Her vital signs gradually stabilized, but she remained unconscious. The physical exhaustion was so severe that her body had essentially shut down to protect itself from further damage. The medical team estimated it would take days, possibly weeks, for her to fully recover. News of Sarah's heroic efforts and subsequent collapse began spreading beyond the hospital walls. Military personnel throughout the base heard the story of the nurse who had worked herself into unconsciousness to save a fellow service member. The tale resonated deeply with everyone who heard it, representing the very best of military values and human compassion. Colonel Patricia Williams, the base commander, visited the hospital the next morning to check on both Sarah and James. She was briefed on Sarah's extraordinary efforts over the past 2 weeks and the medical miracle she had accomplished in saving James's life. Colonel Williams immediately ordered a full investigation into Sarah's actions, not to punish her, but to document her heroism for official recognition. The investigation revealed the full extent of Sarah's sacrifice. Security footage showed her working 18 to 20 hours per day, often falling asleep standing up while monitoring James's equipment. Food delivery logs indicated she had eaten fewer than 5 full meals in 2 weeks. Her personal medical records showed she had ignored her own health problems, including chronic headaches and fatigue that had been building for months. Dr. Martinez, a specialist brought in to evaluate Sarah's condition, explained to Colonel Williams that Sarah's actions went far beyond normal medical duty. She had essentially lived in the hospital for 2 weeks, sacrificing her physical and mental health to provide round-the-clock care that was typically handled by entire teams of medical professionals. Her dedication had been both remarkable and dangerous. As Sarah's story spread through the military community, reports began reaching other bases and installations around the world. Social media posts from hospital staff members shared details of her incredible commitment, and the story quickly gained traction among military families and veterans. Sarah had become a symbol of the selfless service that defined the military's medical corps. James's family arrived from Texas on the 3rd day after Sarah's collapse. His mother, Maria Rodriguez, immediately asked to meet the nurse who had saved her son's life. When she learned that Sarah was still unconscious in the same hospital, Maria spent hours sitting beside her bed, holding her hand and thanking her repeatedly through tears. The Rodriguez family learned more about Sarah's sacrifice from the hospital staff. They discovered that she had worked without pay during many of her extra hours, had spent her own money on specialized medical supplies, and had consulted with expensive medical experts around the world to find the best treatment for James. Her commitment had been total and absolute. On the 4th day, Sarah's eyes finally opened. She was disoriented and weak, unsure where she was or how much time had passed. The first words she spoke were questions about James's condition. Even in her weakened state, her primary concern was still for her patient's well-being rather than her own recovery. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson was at Sarah's bedside when she regained consciousness. She gently explained what had happened and assured Sarah that James was continuing to improve. Sarah tried to sit up, insisting that she needed to check on him personally, but her body was still too weak to support her weight. The full impact of her physical exhaustion was becoming clear. Dr. Harrison examined Sarah thoroughly and explained that her recovery would take time. Her body had been severely depleted, and she would need weeks of rest, proper nutrition, and medical supervision to return to normal health. Sarah protested, wanting to return to work immediately, but the medical team was firm in their instructions. The most touching moment came when James, despite his own limited mobility, asked to be wheeled to Sarah's room. The reunion between patient and nurse brought tears to the eyes of everyone present. James thanked Sarah repeatedly, telling her that he remembered her voice and her constant care even during his unconscious state. Sarah cried as she saw how much he had improved, knowing that her sacrifice had been worthwhile. News reporters began requesting interviews about Sarah's story, but Colonel Williams restricted access to protect both Sarah and James during their recovery. However, she did authorize the release of basic information about Sarah's heroic actions, leading to broader coverage of the story in military publications and local news outlets. The response from the military community was overwhelming. Care packages, letters of support, and flowers began arriving at the hospital for both Sarah and James. Fellow service members from around the world sent messages of encouragement and gratitude. Sarah's actions had touched hearts far beyond her immediate military community, inspiring others with her example of selfless service and dedication. During Sarah's first week of recovery, the hospital became a hub of activity unlike anything the staff had ever experienced. Military personnel from across the base made daily visits to check on her progress and offer their support. Sarah was overwhelmed by the attention, insisting that she had only done what any good nurse would do, but everyone around her knew that her actions had gone far beyond the call of duty. Colonel Williams spent considerable time documenting Sarah's case for higher military authorities. She interviewed every staff member who had witnessed Sarah's dedication, collected medical records showing the extraordinary care she had provided, and compiled testimonials from James's family about the impact of her actions. The evidence painted a picture of heroism that demanded official recognition. James continued his own recovery in the room next to Sarah's, and the two patients became a source of inspiration for everyone in the hospital. Despite their own health challenges, they supported each other through the difficult process of healing. Sarah helped James with his physical therapy exercises from her wheelchair, while James entertained her with stories from his childhood and military training. The bond between Sarah and James had grown beyond that of nurse and patient. They had shared an experience that few people could understand, and their connection was evident to everyone who saw them together. James often said that Sarah had given him a second chance at life, while Sarah found purpose in seeing his steady improvement and growing strength. Dr. Harrison began studying Sarah's treatment methods for James. Recognizing that her innovative approach had achieved remarkable results, he was particularly interested in her combination of traditional medical protocols with experimental techniques she had researched independently. Her success suggested new possibilities for treating similar cases in the future. The medical team's analysis of Sarah's work revealed the depth of her knowledge and intuition. She had made complex medical decisions typically reserved for senior doctors, and her choices had been consistently correct. Her ability to anticipate changes in James's condition had been almost supernatural, suggesting an extraordinary level of medical insight and patient connection. As news of Sarah's story continued to spread, military medical facilities around the world began requesting copies of her treatment protocols. Her methods were being studied and adapted for use with other patients facing similar injuries. Sarah was reluctant to take credit for medical innovations, but the results spoke for themselves. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson arranged for Sarah to receive visits from military chaplains and counselors, concerned about the emotional toll of her experience. However, Sarah seemed remarkably at peace with her actions and their consequences. She expressed no regret about sacrificing her health to save James, stating that she would make the same choice again without hesitation. The investigation into Sarah's actions revealed that she had violated several military protocols regarding work hours and medical procedures. Technically, she should face disciplinary action for working excessive hours without authorization and making medical decisions beyond her scope of practice. However, Colonel Williams decided that the circumstances warranted extraordinary consideration. James's recovery accelerated during the second week, and he began sharing more details about his experience during the critical period. He described hearing Sarah's voice during his darkest moments, feeling her presence even when unconscious and drawing strength from her unwavering dedication. His testimony added powerful evidence to the case for recognizing Sarah's heroism. The Rodriguez family had essentially moved into the hospital during this period, spending every day with both James and Sarah. Maria Rodriguez had adopted Sarah as a second daughter, bringing her home-cooked meals and sitting with her during difficult moments. The family's gratitude was profound and genuine, extending far beyond simple thanks. Medical experts from other military installations began consulting on Sarah's case, both to understand her treatment methods and to evaluate her actions for potential recognition. Dr. Emily Chen, a renowned military medical researcher, spent 2 days at the hospital studying Sarah's records and interviewing staff members about her techniques. Dr. Chen's report concluded that Sarah had demonstrated medical expertise and intuition that exceeded her rank and official training. Her treatment of James represented a level of care typically provided by entire medical teams, accomplished by a single nurse working under extreme conditions. The report recommended Sarah for the highest possible medical recognition. During her third week of recovery, Sarah began working with physical therapists to rebuild her strength. The extended period of physical neglect had weakened her muscles and affected her coordination. However, her determination to return to active duty drove her to push through the challenging rehabilitation process with the same intensity she had shown in caring for James. The therapy sessions became another opportunity for Sarah and James to support each other. They often worked out together, encouraging each other through difficult exercises and celebrating small victories in their recovery. Their friendship had become a bright spot in the hospital, inspiring staff and other patients with their positive attitudes and mutual support. Colonel Williams received word from higher command that Sarah's case had reached the Pentagon. Military leadership at the highest levels were reviewing her actions for potential national recognition. The possibility of such acknowledgement both excited and terrified Sarah, who had never sought attention for her work and felt uncomfortable with the growing publicity. The hospital began receiving visits from military dignitaries who wanted to meet Sarah and James personally. Generals, admirals, and other high-ranking officers made the journey to hear their story firsthand. Each visit reinforced the significance of Sarah's actions and the impact her story was having throughout the military community. James's physical therapy progressed to the point where he could walk short distances with assistance. His first independent steps were taken while holding Sarah's hand, a moment that brought tears to everyone present. The symbolism was powerful. The patient who had been saved was now helping his savior take her own steps toward recovery. During one of their daily conversations, James revealed that he had been researching military decorations and believed that Sarah deserved recognition at the highest level. He had been writing letters to military officials, sharing his perspective on her actions and their impact on his survival. His advocacy for Sarah was passionate and persuasive. The media attention surrounding Sarah's story continued to grow, with requests for interviews coming from national news outlets. However, Sarah remained reluctant to speak publicly about her actions, preferring to focus on her recovery and return to duty. She felt that the attention should remain on James's remarkable recovery rather than her role in achieving it. Dr. Martinez completed his evaluation of Sarah's medical condition and declared that her physical recovery was progressing well. However, he noted that the psychological impact of her experience might have long-term effects that would require ongoing monitoring. Sarah had pushed herself beyond normal human limits, and the emotional toll of such dedication could manifest in various ways over time. 1 month after Sarah's collapse, Colonel Williams received an encrypted message that would change everything. The Pentagon had completed its review of Sarah's case, and the decision had been made at the highest levels of military command. Sarah Mitchell would receive the Medal of Honor for her extraordinary heroism in saving Sergeant Rodriguez's life. It was an unprecedented recognition for a military nurse, and the news sent shockwaves throughout the medical community. The Medal of Honor was typically reserved for combat heroism, but military leadership had concluded that Sarah's actions represented the same level of courage and selflessness displayed by the most decorated warriors. Her willingness to sacrifice her own life to save another, combined with the extraordinary medical skills she had demonstrated, qualified her for the nation's highest military honor. Colonel Williams was sworn to secrecy about the award until the official announcement, but she immediately began coordinating with Pentagon officials to plan the presentation ceremony. The logistics would be complex, as the ceremony would need to accommodate Sarah's continuing recovery while also providing appropriate dignity for such a momentous occasion. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her rehabilitation, unaware of the historic recognition that awaited her. She had regained most of her physical strength and was beginning to discuss returning to active duty with her doctors. Her primary concern remained the hospital's staffing needs and her responsibility to other patients who might require her care. James had progressed to the point where he could walk independently for short distances, and his cognitive function had returned to normal levels. The doctors were calling his recovery miraculous, acknowledging that Sarah's intervention had not only saved his life, but had prevented the severe disabilities that typically resulted from his type of injuries. His family was planning to take him home to Texas for extended rehabilitation. The night before James's discharge, he and Sarah had a long conversation about their shared experience and its impact on both their lives. James expressed his intention to become a nurse himself after completing his military service, inspired by Sarah's example of compassionate care. Sarah encouraged his plans, telling him that his empathy and understanding of patient experiences would make him an exceptional caregiver. Dr. Harrison had compiled a comprehensive medical paper documenting Sarah's treatment methods and their results. The paper was being reviewed by military medical journals and had already generated significant interest from trauma specialists around the world. Sarah's innovative approach was being hailed as a breakthrough in emergency medical care, potentially saving countless lives in future applications. The hospital staff had grown accustomed to the constant stream of visitors coming to meet Sarah and hear her story. However, the security preparations that began during Sarah's 5th week of recovery seemed unusually extensive. Military police increased their presence around the hospital, and several rooms were designated as restricted areas for official use. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson noticed the heightened security measures and questioned Colonel Williams about their necessity. Williams provided vague explanations about visiting dignitaries, but Thompson sensed that something significant was being planned. The level of preparation suggested an event of major importance, though she couldn't imagine what that might entail. Sarah's parents arrived from her hometown in Ohio, having finally been granted leave from their own jobs to visit their daughter. They were amazed by the outpouring of support Sarah had received and struggled to understand the magnitude of attention her actions had generated. To them, Sarah was simply their caring daughter who had always put others' needs before her own. The reunion between Sarah and her parents was emotional and healing. Her father, a retired factory worker, was particularly proud of his daughter's service and sacrifice. Her mother worried about the long-term effects of Sarah's ordeal and tried to convince her to consider leaving military service for a safer civilian nursing position. During her parents' visit, Sarah learned more about how her story had affected people beyond the military community. Her hometown newspaper had featured her story on the front page, and the local veterans organization had organized fundraising efforts to support military medical facilities. Sarah was touched but overwhelmed by the broad impact of her actions. James's final medical evaluations confirmed the completeness of his recovery. The doctors could find no evidence of the brain damage or permanent disabilities they had initially predicted. His motor functions, cognitive abilities, and emotional stability were all within normal ranges. The medical miracle that Sarah had achieved was now fully documented and verified. The day of James's discharge was bittersweet for both patients. They had supported each other through the most difficult period of their lives, and their friendship had become a source of strength for both. James promised to stay in touch with Sarah and to visit whenever possible. Sarah gave him a small American flag pin that she had worn throughout her military service. As James prepared to leave with his family, he made one final request. He wanted to organize a gathering of all the medical staff who had been involved in his care, so he could personally thank each of them. The impromptu ceremony in the hospital cafeteria became an emotional celebration of teamwork, dedication, and the power of human compassion. Colonel Williams received her final instructions from Pentagon officials regarding the Medal of Honor ceremony. The presentation would take place in 1 week, with the President of the United States personally traveling to the military base to present the award. The scale of the event would be unprecedented for a military hospital, requiring extensive security and protocol coordination. The news of the presidential visit began filtering through the base, though the specific reason remained classified. Staff members speculated about the purpose of such a high-level visit, with theories ranging from base inspections to policy announcements. No one suspected that the visit was specifically to honor one of their own colleagues. Sarah continued her daily routine of physical therapy and gradual return to light duties. Still unaware of the historic recognition awaiting her, she had begun taking short shifts in the hospital's outpatient clinic, working with patients who had minor injuries or routine medical needs. Her colleagues noted that her experience seemed to have deepened her empathy and enhanced her already considerable nursing skills. The psychological evaluation that Dr. Martinez had recommended showed that Sarah had processed her traumatic experience in a remarkably healthy way. Despite the extreme stress and physical toll of her ordeal, she showed no signs of post-traumatic stress disorder or other psychological complications. Her sense of purpose and fulfillment from saving James's life had actually strengthened her mental resilience. 3 days before the presidential visit, Colonel Williams finally received permission to inform Sarah about the Medal of Honor award. The conversation would be one of the most difficult and rewarding of Williams's military career, as she would be delivering news that would change Sarah's life forever, while also preparing her for the overwhelming attention and responsibility that would follow. The evening before their meeting, Colonel Williams reviewed Sarah's complete military record, from her initial enlistment through her current hospitalization. The pattern of service, dedication, and excellence was consistent throughout her career, with Sarah's recent heroism representing the culmination of years of exemplary military nursing. She was truly deserving of the nation's highest honor. Colonel Williams asked Sarah to meet her in the hospital's private conference room at 800 hours. Sarah arrived promptly, still moving slowly from her recovery but dressed in her military uniform for the first time since her collapse. She assumed the meeting was about her return to full-duty status or perhaps a routine performance evaluation. When Colonel Williams closed the door and activated the room's security protocols, Sarah knew this was no ordinary meeting. Williams sat across from her, holding a sealed envelope with official Pentagon markings. Her expression was serious but warm, and Sarah could see emotion in her eyes that suggested something significant was about to happen. Colonel Williams began by reviewing Sarah's actions during James's treatment, emphasizing the extraordinary nature of her commitment and the life-saving results she had achieved. Sarah listened politely but uncomfortably, still believing that she had simply done her job as a military nurse. She had never sought recognition for her actions and felt embarrassed by the continued attention. When Colonel Williams opened the sealed envelope and began reading the official citation, Sarah's world changed forever. The words Medal of Honor hit her like a physical blow, and she struggled to understand what was being said. The highest military decoration in the United States was being awarded to her, a simple nurse who had just tried to save a patient's life. Sarah's initial reaction was disbelief, followed by a sense of unworthiness. She protested that she didn't deserve such recognition, that any nurse would have done the same thing in her situation. Colonel Williams patiently explained that the Pentagon's investigation had concluded otherwise, that Sarah's actions represented extraordinary heroism that merited the nation's highest honor. The details of the award ceremony were overwhelming. The president would arrive in 2 days to personally present the medal in a ceremony attended by military leaders from across the country. Media coverage would be extensive, and Sarah would become the first female military nurse to receive the Medal of Honor in the modern era. Sarah asked for time to process the information, feeling dizzy and overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. Colonel Williams assured her that she would have all the support she needed to prepare for the ceremony, including media training, protocol instruction, and psychological counseling if desired. The military would take care of every detail to ensure Sarah was comfortable with the process. The news of Sarah's Medal of Honor award remained classified for security reasons, but rumors began spreading throughout the base about the importance of the upcoming presidential visit. Staff members noticed increased security preparations and the arrival of advance teams from Washington, suggesting that something extraordinary was being planned. Sarah spent the next day in a daze, trying to comprehend how her simple act of caring for a patient had resulted in such unprecedented recognition. She called her parents to inform them of the award, and their reactions ranged from shock to overwhelming pride. They immediately began making arrangements to travel to the ceremony, along with other family members who wanted to witness this historic moment. Dr. Harrison and Lieutenant Colonel Thompson were informed of the award so they could participate in the ceremony planning. Both were thrilled but not surprised, having witnessed Sarah's extraordinary dedication firsthand. They immediately began organizing the hospital staff to ensure everyone who had been involved in James's care could attend the ceremony. The day before the ceremony, James Rodriguez received permission from his doctors to return to the base for the event. His family drove through the night to be present for Sarah's recognition, feeling that they owed their son's life to her sacrifice. James was determined to be there despite his ongoing rehabilitation, understanding the significance of the moment for both of them. Sarah underwent intensive preparation for the ceremony, including briefings on protocol, practice sessions for receiving the medal, and coaching on public speaking for her acceptance remarks. The attention to detail was extraordinary, reflecting the importance of the event and the military's commitment to honoring Sarah appropriately. The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and bright, with perfect weather for the outdoor event that had been planned on the base's parade grounds. Security was unprecedented, with Secret Service agents coordinating with military police to ensure the safety of all attendees. The entire base was essentially locked down for the duration of the presidential visit. Sarah woke early, unable to sleep from nervousness and excitement. She spent time in quiet reflection, thinking about her brother who had died years earlier and wondering if he would be proud of what she had accomplished. The medal felt surreal, like something that happened to other people rather than a small-town girl who had simply wanted to help others. The ceremony began with the arrival of military dignitaries from across the country. Generals, admirals, and senior officials filled the reviewing stands, along with hundreds of military personnel from the base. Sarah's family occupied places of honor in the front row, with her parents beaming with pride despite their nervousness about the formal proceedings. James arrived in a military vehicle with his family, still using a cane but walking independently. The reunion between Sarah and James brought tears to many observers, as the bond between them was evident to everyone present. James had prepared his own remarks about Sarah's impact on his life, though he wasn't sure if he would be called upon to speak. When the presidential motorcade arrived, the atmosphere became electric with excitement and anticipation. Sarah stood at attention with other participants in the ceremony, her heart pounding as she waited for her historic moment. The president's arrival signaled that this was no ordinary military event, but rather a moment of national significance. The president greeted Sarah privately before the public ceremony, thanking her for her service and expressing genuine admiration for her actions. This personal interaction helped calm Sarah's nerves and reminded her that behind all the formal protocols was a simple recognition of her compassion and dedication to saving a fellow human being. As the ceremony began with full military honors, including a military band and honor guard, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude for the opportunity to serve her country and her patients. The medal represented not just her individual actions, but the dedication of all military medical personnel who sacrificed to care for others. The formal presentation was conducted with dignity and precision, with the president reading the full citation of Sarah's heroic actions while she stood at attention. The words describing her sacrifice and its life-saving results echoed across the parade grounds, heard by hundreds of people who had gathered to witness this historic moment. When the president placed the Medal of Honor around Sarah's neck, she felt the weight of its significance and the responsibility it represented. She was now forever linked to the most decorated heroes in American military history, a connection that was both humbling and inspiring. The applause that followed seemed to last forever, with everyone present understanding they had witnessed something truly extraordinary. After the Medal of Honor ceremony concluded, Sarah found herself surrounded by 500 Marines who had assembled to honor her achievement. These were not just any Marines, but representatives from units across the country who had traveled specifically to recognize her valor. The sight of so many uniformed service members standing in perfect formation, all focused on acknowledging her sacrifice, was overwhelming beyond anything she had ever experienced. The Marines had organized this tribute independently, coordinating through their own networks to ensure representation from every major Marine installation. They understood that Sarah's actions embodied the core values of military service, and they wanted to demonstrate their respect and gratitude in a way that would be meaningful to her and memorable for everyone present. As Sarah walked through the formation of Marines, each unit rendered proper military honors with precision and pride. The sound of 500 pairs of boots coming to attention echoed across the parade ground, creating a moment of perfect military discipline and respect. Sarah felt the weight of their acknowledgement and understood that this recognition came from her peers who truly understood the magnitude of her sacrifice. The commanding officer of the Marine formation, General Patricia Hayes, stepped forward to address Sarah directly. General Hayes explained that the Marines had requested the honor of recognizing Sarah's actions because they exemplified the highest traditions of military service. Her willingness to sacrifice everything for a fellow service member represented the kind of courage and dedication that defined the American military. General Hayes presented Sarah with a specially commissioned Marine Corps flag that had been signed by Marines from installations around the world. The flag represented the global military community's recognition of her heroism and their commitment to supporting one another in times of crisis. Sarah accepted the flag with trembling hands, barely able to speak through her emotions. The 500 Marines then performed a synchronized salute that lasted for exactly 60 seconds, 1 second for each day that Sarah would wear the Medal of Honor. The precision and unity of their tribute created a moment of profound military beauty that left everyone present in awe. Sarah returned the salute, feeling connected to a tradition of service that stretched back through generations of American military heroes. James Rodriguez was given the honor of addressing the assembled Marines on behalf of all patients whose lives had been saved by military medical personnel. His remarks were simple but powerful, describing how Sarah's dedication had given him a second chance at life and expressing gratitude to all the medical professionals who served alongside combat troops. The president remained for the Marine tribute, recognizing the significance of this unprecedented gathering. In his impromptu remarks, he noted that Sarah's story demonstrated the best of American values and military tradition. Her actions proved that heroism came in many forms, and that the courage to save lives was as important as the courage displayed in combat. Following the formal ceremonies, Sarah was invited to meet individually with representatives from each Marine unit. These personal conversations revealed the widespread impact of her story throughout the military community. Marines shared how her example had inspired them to recommit to their own service and to look out for their fellow service members with renewed dedication. Dr. Harrison approached Sarah during the reception that followed the ceremonies, carrying a leather-bound folder containing letters from medical professionals around the world. The folder contained over 300 messages from doctors, nurses, and medics who had been inspired by her story and wanted to express their admiration for her dedication to patient care. The letters came from military medical facilities on every continent, as well as civilian hospitals that had heard about Sarah's extraordinary commitment. Many writers shared their own stories of going above and beyond for patients, crediting Sarah's example with reminding them why they had chosen medical careers in the first place. That Sarah's parents were introduced to families of other Medal of Honor recipients who had traveled to witness the ceremony. These families formed a unique community bound together by the extraordinary sacrifices of their loved ones. Sarah's mother found particular comfort in speaking with other women who understood the mixture of pride and worry that came with having a child recognized for such heroism. As the day progressed, Sarah began to understand that her recognition extended far beyond the military community. Representatives from nursing organizations, medical schools, and veteran support groups had all requested meetings to discuss how her story could inspire the next generation of medical professionals. The Rodriguez family spent considerable time with Sarah throughout the day, with Maria Rodriguez presenting her with a handmade quilt that depicted scenes from James's recovery. The quilt had been created by women from their hometown in Texas, each square representing a prayer of gratitude for Sarah's life-saving actions. It was a deeply personal gift that touched Sarah more than any official recognition. James himself had prepared a special surprise for Sarah. Working with hospital staff, he had created a video compilation of messages from other patients Sarah had cared for throughout her military career. The video featured dozens of service members and their families expressing gratitude for Sarah's compassionate care, demonstrating that her dedication to James was part of a larger pattern of exceptional service. The video revealed stories that Sarah had forgotten or never fully realized the impact of. Former patients described how her kindness had helped them through dark periods, how her medical expertise had prevented complications, and how her genuine caring had made their recovery process more bearable. The compilation painted a picture of a medical professional whose impact extended far beyond any single case. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson announced that the military hospital would be establishing the Sarah Mitchell Center for Excellence in Military Nursing, a training facility that would teach Sarah's innovative treatment methods to future generations of military medical personnel. The center would ensure that her techniques would be preserved and shared, potentially saving countless lives in future conflicts. The establishment of the training center represented the institutionalization of Sarah's legacy within the military medical system. Her methods would be studied, refined, and taught to thousands of future medics and nurses. The center would also conduct research into improving emergency medical care under extreme conditions, building on the foundation that Sarah had established. As evening approached, the formal events concluded, but Sarah found herself surrounded by Marines who wanted to share personal words of thanks and admiration. Many had their own stories of medical personnel who had saved their lives or the lives of their fellow Marines. Sarah's recognition had created an opportunity for them to express gratitude that had often gone unspoken. The commanding officers of several Marine units approached Sarah with requests for her to visit their installations to speak with their personnel about dedication, sacrifice, and service. They believed that her example could inspire their troops to higher levels of commitment and mutual support. Sarah was overwhelmed by these requests, but honored by the confidence they showed in her ability to influence others. Colonel Williams presented Sarah with orders for her next assignment, a position at the Pentagon working with military medical policy development. The assignment would allow her to influence medical care standards across all branches of the military, extending her impact far beyond individual patient care. It represented a recognition of her expertise and a platform for broader influence. The day ended with a private dinner attended by Sarah's family, the Rodriguez family, and key military officials who had been involved in her recognition process. The informal setting allowed for personal conversations about the impact of the day's events and the responsibilities that would come with Sarah's new status as a Medal of Honor recipient. As Sarah reflected on the extraordinary day, she felt grateful for the recognition, but remained focused on her fundamental mission of caring for others. The medals, ceremonies, and honors were meaningful, but her greatest satisfaction came from knowing that James Rodriguez was alive and healthy, preparing to build a meaningful life with his family. The story of Sarah Mitchell had become larger than any individual, representing the dedication of all military medical personnel who sacrificed to care for others. Her recognition by 500 Marines and the President of the United States marked not just her individual heroism, but the heroism of every person who chose to dedicate their life to healing others, regardless of the personal cost. In the years that would follow, Sarah's story would continue to inspire new generations of military medical personnel, reminding them that the greatest victories were often won not on battlefields, but in hospital rooms where dedicated professionals fought to save lives with the same courage that others showed in combat.